Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back to the service and support track. My name is Molly, and today we have Josh Steckler here from BOSE talking about how they scaled Jira Service Desk at BOSE. And so a fun fact about Josh is that his dream job is to be a professional beer taster or brewer. And he also loves Jira Service Desk so much that he actually tried to convince his apartment building association to start using it to service requests. So if everybody could please welcome Josh to the stage.
Hi, yep, I'm Josh from BOSE, and I want to give you a glimpse about how my team delivers software services at scale. Just so you know, I'm going to assume you have a bit of admin experience with Jira Service Desk, but basically take you through it. So I started at BOSE as an intern 10 years ago, and I really never left. So this is our headquarters. It's top what we call the mountain in Boston, Massachusetts area. It's actually meant to be shaped like a speaker. And about a year and a half ago, Atlassian relaunched its online community, and I was asked to be one of the community champions. So just so you know, these are all volunteers, fellow customers, a lot of great people involved. So if you haven't been on the community, go and check it out. And I've been working with Jira and Confluence for about 8 years. I've taken a bunch of certification exams, and if you didn't know about the certification exams, you have to go to a proctored testing center, and they take it very seriously. They take my glasses off to make sure I'm not wearing Google Glass or something, get all the real answers. So one of the first summits I went to, someone said to me, "You're from BOSE? BOSE doesn't do software." And I was a little surprised because, of course, we did. We had a big software team even in 2011, but things have changed a lot since then. So that guy must have thought we were still making these. We weren't, but we were still selling mostly large, home-based consumer products. And our products would stay on the market for a very long time. Our business changed a lot. Now most of our products have a wireless component. Our dev cycles are much faster, and our product life cycles are much shorter. And our software is much more present and visible. So we do firmware, app development, microservices, more. And a lot of this transformation started around the same time that we brought in Jira. So one of the questions I get a lot is, how big is BOSE's software team? And well, we have a lot of teams. And we have 4 divisions for consumer, automotive, professional, and wellness. And Jira is not just for software. We have research, prototypes, manufacturing, quality, customer support, and I work with all of them. So just like them, my focus is on product, and it takes a lot of tools to make a BOSE product. My team's responsible for these and a lot more. So some apps like Jira and Confluence, we're responsible for everything. We're the experts, and we partner with the teams that need them. So part of what has helped BOSE scale is the team itself. We're centralized, and we've got a playbook for onboarding new applications, and new ones come up all the time. So before this, we had a lot of different information silos, different processes, and unifying this information for a single source of truth has helped us be faster, more accountable, and there's no more confusion over outdated Excel spreadsheets that people email to each other or store on shares. Our product roadmaps are planned in Trello, detailed in Confluence, linked to Jira epics and stories, worked on with dev tools, and we're deploying faster and with higher quality than we were before. So as an internal, centralized consultant, I share one team's successes with the others, and that's definitely helped the company grow. All of these applications have their nuances, and we might get tickets on any in any day of the week. So obviously my focus is Atlassian tools, and this is how Jira is set up at BOSE. So nobody outside my group has admin rights. There's about 3 of us that generally work on these things. And I'm pretty much the only one that does any configuration of workflows, fields, or schemes. So just about every BOSE product that's out on the market today went through a workflow I built. so you're welcome. Um, right now, we're using server products, but we'll soon be moving to data center. And another one of the questions I get a lot is how I can manage 2 Jira instances, on such a small team. Well, we don't do that. We're running both of them together as one server instance. And this chart represents the active registered user base of that Jira instance. Since data center is more expensive, we've been planning that move for a while. We wanted to keep our Jira software licenses only to the people who really need them. So we registered the entire company as free users of the customer portal only. And when I say customer, these are always people with IDs on our Active Directory. They're usually BOSE employees. And it's an important point because one of the features I like is when you try to log into Jira software, but you don't have a Jira software license, you're automatically kicked to Jira Service Desk where you can request a license, and that's right on the front page for me, requesting Jira access. So since our responsibilities on my team are so vast and our user base is so big, it's a challenge to effectively do everything we do and to configure Jira Service Desk to meet the need of serving all those people. And one of the constant things I deal with across Jira and across all tools is figuring out what the right scope of the project or space is. How many people are going to work in it, what content should go here, what content should go there, and it has some interesting implications for Jira Service Desk specifically because there's a one-to-one relationship between the customer portal and the project. And the first thing you have to figure out when you're trying to pick the right scope for your project is who are your customers, because you don't want to mess with them. They're the most important deciding factor because it needs to be easy for them to figure out what they need to submit and where they need to submit it. And you're not going to have a chance to train all your customers. We have thousands and thousands of them. They won't be able to figure out how to do this unless it's right there at the beginning. But sharing a Jira project across multiple teams is hard. Getting everyone to agree on 7 schemes for a regular Jira software project is hard enough. But when you add Jira Service Desk, there's other things like standardizing on the messaging, the organization of your request types, and you have only one Confluence space for your knowledge base, too. So when I was going through this, one of the other goals I had was to use what was given to me out of the box and try to minimize the use of add-ons. So the only significant add-on I have running right now is Suite Utility for Jira. And since we have a 10,000 user license, we have to buy all of our add-ons at the 10,000 tier as well. I get a good number of requests, and I have a Confluence template for evaluating add-on requests. But figuring out how to use what is given to you out of the box in innovative ways and ways that you might not find in the Atlassian documentation is actually kind of fun. So I would also recommend checking out the Atlassian community because someone's probably had the questions that you've had before, and they're out there and willing to help you. So I described my team a few minutes ago. So we handled the software tools, but under the same leadership, there's tools for electrical, mechanical, CAD, and operations. And our customers are used to seeing this all underneath one bucket. Basically, that meant right from the beginning, we knew we would have to stick to one project. And I had to come up with ways to make this work for Jira. So one of the challenges specifically was with notifications, notifications for newly created tickets. So my team doesn't want to get notified about the CAD team's tickets, and they don't want to get notified about our tickets either. We all know that Jira is very chatty, and one of the ways I did this was coming up with a field for the assigned group. So here's an example of some of my request types. Actually, these are all Jira request types. So each one of these request types is clearly linked to the group that's going to be working on it. All Jira requests go to my team. I made it so that the field for assigned group is set on every request type in the preset values, and every time that a user submits it, my team will get an email. But you're probably wondering how a field will solve that problem if you're familiar with creating notification schemes. So the trick here is the field type. It's actually a user picker and not a select. You can add user picker fields to your notification schemes. So what that looks like is I will go and create a user account for each group of my organization. The key part of it is that you'll use a group notification email account for the Jira account. Again, this is Jira Server, so it might look a little bit different for cloud, but it should work similar way. So one of the drawbacks is it does take up a license, but generally a Jira license is a lot less money than buying an add-on. And it doesn't need to be a Jira Service Desk agent license. It just needs to be a Jira software license. In order to get any email from Jira, you do need a license, but the Jira software one works fine. I also created a special group to contain all these fake users that are really just serving as options in a custom field. The reason for that is so that I could go to the custom field context and limit the results of that field to just the relevant values. So the next thing to do is go back to your notification scheme and add my assigned group field as a recipient of the issue created event. And there you go. We have emails that are more relevant going to the right team. So one of the other things that I had to figure out is that sometimes agents create tickets through the regular Jira interface and not through the customer portal. So I made this assigned group field required. And one of the other things I did was make the customer request type field required. It's important for that to be entered when a ticket's created so that your customers can actually see that on the customer portal. So when users start to type in the assigned group field, they'll get the auto-suggest, and only the acceptable options will show up. And if they click on the little icon for the people, they'll get this screen. And again, it's just the relevant options for the teams that are on during my organization. And the agent can pick any one of these. So in addition to using this in a notification scheme, you can use it anywhere where JQL is used, including with queues. So this is a queue for tickets that are in a pending status. And I like to make a lot of queues for each one of my teams. And each team can use the custom fields that are relevant to that particular team. I don't have to make my queues one size fits all either. It makes it a lot more relevant for each team to decide what they want to see. And I also have a little neat trick for you. So when you have a lot of queues, if they're related, you can still have a lot of clutter. So what I like to do is put this little downwards arrow with tip rightwards into the name of the queue. So it's not actually a function of Jira Service Desk. It's just a character you can put into the name that makes it look like they're related. So you have 4 different queues for the software team, and they're all sort of looking like they're under one bucket. Using these fields in the SLAs are also very useful. So different teams can work different hours on different calendars, but it's all on the same project. So this example is showing that my CAD team works from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., 7 a.m. in the east to 5 p.m. in the west, actually, so on a Monday through Friday. That's 13 hours of SLA running time per day, and if my goal is 2.5 working days, that's 32 hours, 30 minutes. So when I set up my SLAs, I always do it based on the actual working time of the people who are working on the tickets. In my team, it's a 9-hour working day. If the same 2.5 working day goal, I would set my SLA goal to 22 hours, 30 minutes. So having both of these teams in one project lets me easily report on the SLA results across the entire organization. Same SLAs, different goals, but I can still tell the success or failure across the entire organization. So one of the other ways this is useful is if there's ever a need to assign a piece of work from one ticket to one team on the other side of the organization, I can create a subtask just for that piece. Onboarding is one of the places I see this personally most often. Most of the onboarding tickets are handled by my team, so there's things like access and install some applications. But when it's something that a CAD team needs to work on, we'll assign their little piece back to their team. And the customer doesn't need to see that. The customer just cares that the work is done or not. But there's only one place to ask for onboarding, so that's another reason why having the one project helps us get that service out to customers better. So we tried this out in a pilot with our 20 top ticket submitters, and before we went live, we were transitioning away from an old system. We were already processing more tickets in Jira Service Desk than that old system. Oh, yeah, there's the subtask. So one of the other factors we had to deal with was scaling the custom fields. So custom fields is always a scale problem with Jira. And when I was setting up my service desk, I thought I would need about 30 to 40 new custom fields. And that, we had 70 applications to manage, so there's a lot of questions I need to ask the customers. But there's always a performance concern with custom fields. So there's an opposite relationship between the number of fields you have and your performance, especially with transactions like searching. It's best practice to keep that as low, the number of custom fields as low as possible, and to reuse them whenever possible. And I knew that what I was setting up was just the beginning. I had increased the amount of fields and apps that I needed to support over time. So having lots of fields is also a big source of confusion for my users. Every new field you create is shown automatically in every field configuration in Jira, and your users see those field names when they go to the search in the More drop-down menu. So they also will get lots of columns that they don't understand when they go to do an export. So one of the other factors towards scaling my service desk was admin rights. If you have project admin rights, you can go create request types and manage a lot of pieces of your service desk project, but you can't create custom fields, at least on server. We saw something this morning that I'm not sure how that'll fit into this eventually for cloud users. So since I'm the only system admin, I'm the bottleneck for every new field that needs to be created. So all of these things together, I wanted to come up with a solution to reduce the number of fields as much as possible. But I wanted to ask the user lots of questions. And when I'm getting those customer requests, the best case scenario is that I get all the answers I need right at the beginning of every ticket, so I don't have to go back and forth. That really slows things down. So I'd also recommend you make sure your questions are very clear and you add help text to make sure you get the best quality answers. It's also a good idea to standardize on the phrasing if you're asking similar questions across different request types. But getting back to the fields, this is pretty ordinary looking for a Jira access request. But these three bottom fields are very Jira specific. These are kinds of questions that would have been the majority of the 30 or 40 I would have had to ask. They're very specific to one place and wouldn't be used in any other place. So I'm not going to use sprint managers for any other application out there. In order to reduce the number of fields, I came up with a way to make them generic, meaning that a specific custom field is reused in a number of different ways for different request types. So when you're going to add fields to a new request type on my service desk, I have these request detail 1, 2, 3, and I have a key. So what I do is I add those fields to the request type, and I set those fields to the question that the user sees, but it's really getting entered into a generic field. So the next thing I do is for each one of those I'm asking to the user, like for instance right here I'm asking who should be project administrator for request detail 1. I put into the key field what those questions really are. So this is what the agent is going to end up seeing for each one of these request detail fields. These are all hidden with preset values on your request types. And this is what it ends up looking like after the person submits the ticket. So I think this helped me reduce my number of fields by about 25. And when I was introducing this concept to my team, they actually picked it up pretty quickly. So 1 for project administrators equal request detail 1. Josh and Ben are going to get request or project administrator rights. So I took some time to train them. And since the agents are people you can train, it didn't take too long for this concept to work for us. One other tip I have if you do go and do this is to put these fields at the bottom of your view screens for your agents. It makes it a little easier when there's no clutter below for the agents to read them. So what I showed is great for text fields, but it doesn't work for drop-downs. Custom field contexts only work at a project level, not at a request type level. So each time you really need a drop-down, you might actually need to go and create a field. But one thing to consider is to use the components field in a way you might not have otherwise used it for. So I love components because, again, I'm not the bottleneck for adding new options to these lists. In my case, I'm using for the application names. And I also love the component lead feature because it's another way I can make notifications more relevant. Even if I'm not the one working on all the Jira issues, I like to keep up to date on them to make sure that my customers for Jira are getting all the service that they need. So on any team, there's also value to having Jira Service Desk and Jira software running together. Since my group owns a lot of tools, we both track our internal initiatives and we work on tickets. So having Jira Service Desk and Jira software together lets us plan things like upgrades and work on tickets all in one system. So being able to unify that work onto a dashboard or agile board makes it really clear what's on my plate. I look across both a Service Desk project and a Jira software project, and I create these quick filters to hide things that I'm trying to make relevant for my day. The transparency of this makes my customers more aware of what's going on and have more trust in my team. And I also have team members that are overseas and team members that work from home on a regular basis. So since we don't see them, we can still keep up to date on everything that's going on with all of those team members. And by the way, I think this will be talked about more tomorrow, but we also have adopted a policy of openness with our tickets and in our project management. So everyone who has a Jira license can see all of our tickets and all of our project management work. Sharing this to everyone also helps our customers trust us and understand what place on the backlog their requests get into. So having this information visible to all those people can also sometimes be a risk, so you can use the security level feature if there's some tickets you need to hide, like offloading of users, but hopefully that doesn't happen too often. We're so open that we also have our backlogs and boards up on a TV in our office. So for boards, actually I have another tip. Get everyone to put a real face picture on there. You know, I don't want to see my face either, but it makes a better connection with your teammates when you can actually see their face. And I'd also choose your issue types and your issue type icons really wisely. So for me, I have incident and request for my service desk, story up and task for my project management. That way, I clearly know that any request is something that came from a customer, and that probably needs to be taken care of more quickly. So I also really like Kanban backlogs. Another way that Jira Service Desk and Jira Software work well together is that you can put your SLAs onto your Kanban backlogs. So this SLA here is my time to first reply. Makes sense because the items in the backlog haven't been started yet, and I know that I need to pick the things off the top of the backlog before this timer hits 0. There's the SLAs. You can also use different SLAs on the work view of your Kanban board. So this SLA is the time to resolution. So once I've started something, I'm showing a different SLA on the different part of the Kanban board. So after we went live with Jira Service Desk, there was still a lot to do. We moved on to ESM. I was expanding Jira Service Desk to other teams. We're moving on to Data Center. And we're working on being not just tool owners, but tool users by adding Slack and other tools to our team. So I said ESM. Usually that means enterprise service management to a lot of people. But my focus is engineering. So I've been calling this in my team engineering service management. Scaling Jira Service Desk isn't just about configurations, it's about teams. There's a lot of opportunity to connect different parts of your organization with Jira Service Desk. So BOSE has a group that's behind our home audio streaming products, and I started introducing Jira Service Desk to this team. So there's a lot of infrastructure behind the services, so making your speaker keep playing Pandora or Spotify or another service has a lot of infrastructure, and the team working on this gets requests from all around the company. They can use my established SLAs, like time to first reply and time to resolution, but they can also have their own targets, their own request types, and they can also link their tickets back to their engineering work. These teams have been in Jira for a long time, and they've introduced this as a new part of how they collect information from their customers. The team also had an existing Confluence space, so they naturally hooked that up as their knowledge base, and all these tools together made this a natural fit. So they also integrated it with a number of tools they were also using, like PagerDuty and Lucidchart. There's a few other teams I'm working with, like product quality. We're testing a lot of BOSE products across the company. So I have some prototype units, and we're making it so that people can report bugs from those prototype units through Jira Service Desk and get those back to the engineers so we can release better products. So with all these different teams working in Jira software every day, and all the customers and agents that we've opened up Jira Service Desk to, my single server for Jira and my single server for Confluence are pretty widely used, and the possibility of those going down really keeps me up at night, and it would be a huge impact to the company if these things went down. We're in the middle of our migration to Atlassian data center products. So we're continuously evaluating our infrastructure for all of our applications, and as a company, we're moving to AWS. We're also moving our databases from MySQL to Postgres, and between these two things, there's a lot of change ahead. The top's what our current infrastructure looks like, bottom's the future, and if you multiply this diagram by 2, one for Jira, one for Confluence, it shows that there's a lot of work, a lot of complexity. And these diagrams are simplified. I'm not going to go too far into depth. That could be its own talk, but maybe next year. And it's definitely a factor in our ability to scale up Jira Service Desk. So failures do happen, and we want to make sure that we're serving customers 24/7. So relatively new to my team's ownership is Slack. And we're not just owners of the software tools, we're users too. So with Slack, We're an enterprise grid subscriber. I'm an organization admin. We have about 80 workspaces and over 1,000 users. Actually, one of the things I'll tell you about Slack is that I love the notifications based on keywords. So whenever someone says Jira or my name or anything like that in Slack, I get a ping. And even if the customer or person didn't know who I am, didn't know who supports Jira, I chime in and I talk to them. Actually, another thing that I think is cool is using Jira webhooks to post back to your own personal channel. So in Slack, you have a channel just for yourself that's meant for using notes, but that channel also works with applications and integrations. So I'm trying to get myself out of email, and I get a number of my Service Desk notifications posted back to my personal channel. We've also shared a bunch of channels across our entire organization. So all of those 80 workspaces have a Slack internal help channel. So this is another place that people are able to request services from my team. So we're hoping to integrate this with Jira Service Desk eventually. We're working with NextUp and Slack and trying to figure out what the best solution is for my team. But allowing my customers to stay in the tool they're already using to ask for service will definitely help them move faster too. Some of this work's a little bit on hold because I started working on it right around the time that the Slack and Atlassian partnership was announced, so I don't have a screenshot of how that's working right now, but maybe next year again for that one too. One of the other things that's also helping us plan and execute this migration is all the tools that we're using for ourselves. And I have a few examples of that. So we're using Fisheye, GitHub, to store a lot of configuration files for our applications. We're tying those changes in configuration files back to the tickets that created the changes in Jira Service Desk. So that traceability really helps us with figuring out why things go wrong occasionally and planning our work for future initiatives, making sure that things go better. I also have a lot of integrations that I got for my product teams, but we're using them to our advantage as well. So the data center diagram I showed you on the last slide was a Lucid chart. We have Lucid chart plugin installed on Confluence, and I use Confluence to make all my plans for all my migrations. We also have questions for Confluence that my teams manage. People also can use that to figure out where to go for service for our applications. And I'm also working on bringing portfolio management into Jira. So there's a lot of use for this for my product teams, but there's use for it for me too, because I can link my Jira work up to my organization's initiatives, those organization initiatives up to the company initiatives, and at a really high level, I can bring all of my company's work into Jira, and from the top down, be able to see all of the execution of that work. It all comes back to scale, showing that we have a lot on our plate and how long it will really take to complete all of that work lets me figure out what the scale of the actual people on my team needs to be. So I'm going to wrap this up with 3 pieces of advice for starting to scale your team. The first thing is to train your agents. Train them on concepts like linking issues, on creating filters and dashboards, especially train them on the difference between resolution and status. These are all things that will help your agents be better at providing service for your customers. So again, remember those customers. Your agents can be taught, but your customer shouldn't need any instruction. And you're doing all this work for them. Make it easy for them. I was in a conversation once with an admin who felt that the customer of your service desk was the agents, and that's just not right. in order to be successful, you need to remember that the people using the portal are the most important deciding factor in setting things up. Starting with this in mind is important because part of scale, again, is your customer acceptance and satisfaction. You want the people you interact with for the first time to have a good experience because those customers are going to be your advocates for your system and for your team. It's hard to change someone's perception after they have a negative experience. So another piece of advice is be creative, learn your tools in depth, find new ways to use them, new ways that aren't in the documentation, and don't be afraid of change. Be obsessed with making everything better. Your customers can handle it, and all those changes you make over time will make your company a better operating machine. So, innovation and the drive for better, it's part of the core mission of BOSE. I'm only a small piece, but it really never gets old seeing people wearing BOSE products in the wild. So knowing I had a small part and working on that was always puts a smile on my face. Thank you for coming. Open to any questions.
What do you use for reporting out of Jira Service Desk? Is it the native reports in Jira?
We use the native dashboards in Jira. There's some parts of it inside the actual Service Desk reports. So we do it by team. We do it by incident versus request, SLA, success or failure are big ones.
I have some other questions for you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
So you've talked a lot about the support part, but I take it that you also have development teams. Do you have any SLAs with them, just in case a ticket comes in and it needs development time?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, after I wrote this presentation, I met with that cloud team again. So one of the SLAs that we were working on and one of the request types we were working on with them is requesting a hotfix release. So hotfixes obviously mean that there's a problem. So we have an SLA for deployment as well. So that is complementary to the SLAs of response and resolution. So we want to make sure we're deploying as quickly as possible and keeping up with, is this fix working? So the thing isn't going to be called resolved until we're clear that it's working, even though we want to make sure it was deployed as quickly as possible.
And if a ticket comes in where it turns out it is not worthy of a hot fix and it just goes along in the general development cycle, because it will keep a ticket open for multiple weeks. How do you prevent that?
Well, the workflow that I'm using always has a pending status. And I also have a custom field called reason pending. So what I will set up for this team is a reason pending called awaiting development, and I'll set in my SLA configuration when something is in pending status, and the reason pending is awaiting development, that it will have no goal, no SLA goal. Obviously, they'll estimate it and work on it in agile fashion.
Any other questions? You can take one more. Is that it? Great. Thanks so much, Josh.